This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nash Villager Podcast. It's April 2nd, 2025. On this day in 1822, a man named Joseph Dixon began manufacturing pencils by hand in Massachusetts. He was 11 when the pencil was invented in France, and within a couple of years, he started tinkering around to figure out how to make them himself. Evidently, this was not a particularly unusual hobby at the time. The author Henry David Thoreau was an avid pencil maker too. But Dixon didn't just make them for himself, the way most hobbyists did. He started making them to sell for 5 cents each. And he ended up building a lucrative business for himself based on the most important ingredient in pencils, graphite. Along with pencils, he invented and manufactured a graphite crucible that could withstand an incredibly high heat. Now, by the time the Civil War rolled around, Dixon had the money from his crucible business to invest in new ventures. And soldiers on the go were fueling a ton of interest in pencils. No need to carry around ink, after all. So Dixon invented a machine to produce the writing implements, mass production of pencils. By 1913, he was so successful, and his company settled on what we now think of as the platonic ideal of pencils, the yellow No. 2 Ticonderoga with an eraser attached to the end with a brass cuff. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. Dixon's Massachusetts business may have developed the classic American pencil, but New England's trees aren't anywhere near as good for pencil making as one that grows all over Middle Tennessee, the eastern red cedar. And that tree is the reason that Shelbyville became a nexus for the pencil-making industry for much of the 20th century, what was probably the height of the pencil's popularity. At first, a man named James Musgrave started milling cedar and shipping it out of town pencil factories. He even figured out that the wood in the rustic cedar fences that were common around Bedford County then was particularly good. It was already aged to perfection. So he went around offering to replace people's old cedar fences with more modern wire materials and then prepared that wood for pencil stock. And when World War I complicated shipping his wood, Musgrave just started making the pencils himself. The timing was lucky. Out west, at around that time, people were starting to figure out that a different kind of cedar grown in places like California is even better for pencils. So the demand for eastern red cedar dried up. And with that, Musgraves was on the other end of the industry entirely, shipping wood in from the West Coast to make pencils at his Shelbyville factory. But by then, the people of Shelbyville were pretty interested in the pencil business. Competitors sprung up here and there. The Shelbyville Pencil and Novelty, the National Pencil Company, Empire Pencil, U.S. Pencil and Stationery. Governor Buford Ellington started calling Shelbyville Pencil City. And the pencil business isn't what it used to be. Most of those Bedford County factories have closed. Things shifted, and Tyson Foods became the big employer associated with the town. But the original Musgrave pencil is still chugging along. And one of Shelbyville's biggest economic announcements of the last few years, an $11 million expansion of the Newell Brands packaging facility, feels like it's kind of a cousin to the pencil business. Because out of the huge family of products that Newell makes, the items being prepped for sale in Shelbyville still include writing implements, Sharpie markers, and Papermate pens. In just a few minutes, Nashville's Kurdish community continues to welcome spring with Nowruz celebrations. That's coming up after the newscast.
.3 is a radio station. But our news is not just limited to the airwaves. I'm Metro reporter Cynthia Abrams, and here at WPLN, we want to keep you informed in whatever way you like to consume the news. Maybe it is our local newscasts.
Here's the latest from WPLN News at 3:04.
Or maybe you prefer listening to the Nash Villager podcast in your podcasting app.
It's March 25th, 2025. On this day in 1993, Dave Thomas.
Maybe, like me, you read the Nash Villager newsletter in your email inbox every morning. Or maybe midday live radio is more your vibe.
I'm Khalil Colonna. And this is Nashville.
The list goes on. We've got our stories available to read at WPLN.org and all across social media platforms. WPLN wants to make our reporting available to you in whatever form suits you. Give today at WPLN.org.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. A proposal to allow Tennessee's public schools to refuse children without legal status is headed to the Senate floor. WPLN's Miriam reports that the bill cleared its last hurdle yesterday before a full vote of the state Senate.
The sponsor says the bill is meant to ease the financial burden of educating English learners. Advocates say that the majority of EL students are citizens. And a state fiscal review says that while the full financial impact is unclear, the state could be poised to lose up to $1 billion in federal funding if the bill passes. It's now one step closer to that milestone after this last vote that, like many of the bill's previous hearings, drew protesters. Lawmakers ordered the room cleared after members of the crowd started singing. 80-year-old activist Lynn McFarland refused to leave, and after 20 minutes, troopers carried her out of the building and took her to booking. The bill now heads to the Senate floor for a full vote. Mariana Baca-Yao, WPLN News.
Tennessee's legislature is considering a bill to get rid of the Nonpartisan Human Rights Commission. The panel does the work of enforcing civil rights laws in situations involving employment, housing, and public accommodations. The measure would shift those responsibilities to the Office of the Attorney General, which often acts as a partisan arm of the governor's administration. If passed, the Tennessee Lookout reports the bill would also create a way for white students to complain if they believe they were denied admission to a school because of diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. It also removes any state-level investigation into claims of educational discrimination based on disability or religion. There are currently about 1,000 pending complaints on the Human Rights Commission's docket. If the bill becomes law, those complaints would be dismissed. Tennessee lawmakers voted yesterday to advance a bill to deregulate a significant portion of the state's wetlands. WPLN's Caroline Eggers reports the bill targets what's called isolated wetlands, which lost federal protections 2 years ago.
Advocates of the wetlands bill, which have thus far been lobbyists for developers, argued that deregulating wetlands could lower housing costs. But there is no evidence to support that one way or the other. Representative Justin Jones of Nashville opposed the bill. He says,
the only people who we know will benefit from this are private developers, and that wealth will not trickle down to everyday Tennesseans.
Wetland losses have been documented to affect housing costs in other ways. A recent report from the Union of Concerned Scientists says wetlands save homeowners money each year, like billions of dollars per state. That's because wetlands act as natural defenses against floods. Caroline Eggers, WPLN News.
State health officials just announced 3 more cases of the measles. All 4 cases reported so far have been in Middle Tennessee. This is part of an ongoing surge in measles across the country. The CDC has reported nearly 500 cases this year in 20 states. As the Trump administration continues to slash spending at health agencies and lay off their workers, measles response is taking a hit. Metro Nashville Health Department announced it had to shut down measles vaccine clinics because of canceled grants. The Elon Musk-led group known as DOGE recently cut off about $180 million in grants for Tennessee. The money was available for vaccine work, contact tracing, and other infectious disease prevention. Nashvilleian Gretchen Walsh has been named Division I Swimmer of the Year by the College Swimming and Diving Coaches Association. It's the second year in a row that the Harpeth Hall and Nashville Aquatic Club alum has won that honor. Walsh is a senior at the University of Virginia. She won the 50 and 100 freestyle and 100 butterfly events at this year's NCAA championships. She also set league records in 2 of the 3 races. That follows her success at the Paris Olympics, where she earned 4 medals, 2 gold and 2 silver. A Nashville author says she writes young adult books for immigrants like her. Dawn Fung Nguyen told our Daily Show This Is Nashville about her novel A Two-Placed Heart, a fictionalized version of her own family's story. When she was 7, her family came to Tennessee after suffering from a famine in Vietnam.
So for me, I think I write to my child self, books that I would have needed as a kid. So I think a lot of my books are always going to have Vietnamese children, especially Vietnamese immigrant children, because that's my experience. And I needed those books when I was growing up at that age, and I didn't have them. I think the closest I had was like the All-American Girl series. There was Molly, who had brown hair.
In Wynn's book, the main character's younger sister wants to forget about Vietnam and just think of herself as American. Wynn says she hopes the story will help immigrant kids come to terms with their own immigration stories. Jim Ayers, a prominent Nashville banker and philanthropist, died yesterday following a series of health problems. He was 81. Ayers led First Bank, which has grown in value from $14 million in the 80s to more than $10 billion today. Ayers grew up in Parsons, a small town in West Tennessee. Later in life, he gave back to his hometown through the Ayers Foundation. It helps high schoolers in Parsons and other rural, economically depressed communities make college and career plans. The foundation also leads conservation and anti-poverty efforts in rural areas. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. This week, the WPLN team is taking over your guide to what's happening around town with a special look at a beloved cultural tradition.
I'm Rachel Iacovone, here with another edition of Nashville Public Radio's What Where Wednesday, keeping you up to date with the happenings in Nashville this week. Live music opportunities include WNXP presents Anna St. Louis at the Blue Room on Saturday. WNXP's Vinyl Listening Party for Music Citizens Episode 2 is at Vinyl Tap this Sunday. Meanwhile, the weather station performs at the Basement East. For more events, head over to WNXP.org/events.
Wish I could say to you that I knew just what to do. Wish I could say it now, and it would all work out.
This week for What Where Wednesday, we're talking with WPLN's Rose Gilbert about Nowruz, which has technically passed, but is far from over here in Nashville. Hey, Rose.
Hey, Rachel.
So tell us, what is Nowruz?
So Nowruz is a New Year festival that celebrates the arrival of spring. It's celebrated by many cultures, but here in Nashville, it is by far most associated with our Kurdish community, which is the largest in all of America.
So what does a Kurdish Nowruz celebration look like?
So I had a chance to go last year, and I've been to a few events this year. It's a lot of fun. There's food, there's dancing, there's music. Musicians actually travel from all over the country and even the world to be at celebrations here in Nashville. There's poetry, but I'd say the most iconic part of Nowruz is the fire. The flame is actually lit the evening before the official day of Nowruz, and there's a tradition where people jump over it. And the fire kind of symbolizes light winning out over darkness, or freedom winning out over oppression, and that's, like I said, the most iconic part, I would say.
So another layer, of course, is that a lot of Nashville Kurds are Muslim, and it was Ramadan last month. What has that meant this year?
Yeah, so the largest celebration of Nowruz, which is hosted by the Tennessee Kurdish Community Council, has been pushed back until after Ramadan ends. And that way people, don't have to worry about fasting or, maybe being a little bit more subdued because of religious obligations. But, some people still celebrate it in late March, closer to the actual date. Just depends on their personal relationship with their faith and what feels right. But we did go to a pretty fun Nowruz event during Ramadan. It was after sundown, so people could eat, but it had all the usual dancing and music as well.
Yeah, my feet were sore for a couple days. This one was at Plaza Mariachi, which I think is kind of a cross-cultural hub. It encourages people who are not from that tradition, like us, to really participate. So what does the April 13th one look like now that it's after Ramadan?
Yeah, so I went last year. It was beautiful. It had the fire. It had stages with music. It had people dancing. It had everybody dressed up in their best Kurdish traditional clothes, which, oh my goodness, the women's dresses, they're beautiful and sparkly, and they have these long trailing sleeves that flutter in the wind. So those are gorgeous. And everybody was kind of picnicking. A lot of people had brought food to grill with their family. You had kids running around and playing tag and soccer. So it was just a lot of fun. And everyone's welcome. But also, one thing that's worth noting is there are a lot more Nowruz festivals this year than even last year. And part of that is because there have been a big uptick in local Kurdish nonprofit groups here. There's the Kurdish Diaspora Center, which is a new group in town, which is a local chapter of an international group. And there's also a lot of cultural groups that have been founded by Bakuri Kurds, which are Kurds from Turkey. And they've been having their own events while also participating in each other's events. So, I've spotted people from various, sections of the community at each other's nonprofit events, which has been really cool to see.
And you've reported on that before, but can you explain for those who might not know, that is a new population that has arrived here. So where were the Kurds that maybe people have grown up with in the 90s and early 2000s? They were not from Turkey.
Yeah, so I would say the biggest and most established part of Nashville's Kurdish community is from northern Iraq, which a lot of Kurdish people call Bashur. And those are the folks who came in the 70s and then in different waves in the 90s, a lot of times fleeing the Ba'athist regime or Saddam Hussein. But in recent years, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic, there's been a big uptick in people coming from Turkey, or Bakur, as a lot of Kurdish people call it. And they've been coming to Nashville because it's so well known as this hub of the Kurdish community in America. So that's been kind of a more recent development in the Kurdish community here that's been really cool to see. And so they've been bringing their own, musical traditions and Nowruz traditions as well. A Bakuri-led cultural group were the ones who had hosted that Plaza Mariachi celebration that we attended.
So how many, by the end of all of the Nowruz celebrations, will you have been to this year?
It's looking like 4, I think, is where we're going to have the tally.
Unless someone convinces you to find another one this week. Well, thank you so much, Rose.
Thank you, Rachel.
For more information about the Nowruz celebration next Sunday and other events happening this week, visit WNXP.org. I'm Rachel Iacovone, and thank you for listening to another edition of What We're Wednesday.
We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday, so subscribe in your favorite podcasting app to make sure you never miss an episode. And if you like this, you'll probably enjoy the Nashvillager newsletter too. You'll get perspective from more of my colleagues at Nashville Public Radio and links to the stories we're following. Sign up for those daily emails at WPLN.org/Nashvillager. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.